everyone and welcome to another episode of Cooking at King's, and today we're going to do another basic that we can use for lots of different things. So I'm going to make the thing first, the basic thing, and then I'm going to show you a couple of ways in which we can do it and use it, and we'll go from very simple to a bit more complex, so different skills that we can be using. And basically what we're going to be making is we're going to be making a short crust pastry. So this pastry is used in things like tarts or cakes, not cakes, but things like that. But we're going to be using it for mince pies and cheese straws, and we might also have a go at custard tarts as well. So that's the kind of thing that we can use this for. The recipe for the pastry is quite simple, but it involves a few different techniques that we're going to use today. And then you'll see from the very, very simple to the little bit harder. So I think what we'll first do is we'll make the pastry. So I'll put up the ingredients for that. And then as I go into the different activities, the different things, I'll show you the different ways of the different recipes and the different things that you'll need for those as we go through. So we're going to start with the pastry. So pastry is very, very easy, this kind of pastry. Again, pastry can go from being quite simple, short crust pastry, to a little bit harder like a choux pastry or a flaky pastry, but this one's quite simple. And all we need for this one is we're going to be using some plain flour and then some butter. I'm using spread, but I would prefer butter, but this is fine. I just don't have any other things at the moment. And then we need a bit of salt, a little bit of salt for taste. So salt is a flavour enhancer. It doesn't mean it's always going to taste salty. Salt brings out the flavour of whatever we're creating. And water is the other thing that we need. We need a little bit of water. So I've got a cup of water here. This is not an ingredient, this is my cup of coffee. So we don't need that, that's just there for me. So we're going to start really simply. We're going to take our flour. So I've measured out the flour, and you've got the amount that you'll need, but I've measured it out just for my ease. So I'm starting out with the flour, and then I'm just going to put a little bit of salt into it. Like I said, this is just for taste. So we just add the salt so it enhances all the flavours that we're going to put with it as well. So that's just normal table salt. And then what we have is butter. Now, like I said, I would prefer to use butter. I just don't have any in at the moment. So sometimes we have to do a recipe, and that is fine. So I've got my butter, and it's in, you can't really see it in here, but it's in little cubes as best we can. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's just whatever you can do. And what we're going to do today is we're going to be doing some crumbing. It's called crumbing. And the reason it's called crumbing is quite simply because what we're trying to achieve is it's going to look eventually like breadcrumbs. That's what we're going to try and make. So it's going to look something a bit like breadcrumbs. So I get my butter and I just put it into my flour. And the movement I'm going to be doing is kind of like, it's called rubbing. That's what we're going to do. So we rub the flour with the salt in and the butter together with just this movement. And as we do that, like I said, what we should eventually get is lots of things that look like breadcrumbs. And so that's nice. We're sort of adding a bit of air into the mixture. It is a messy one. We do need to use our hands. You could, if you had a mixer, a good mixer, you could put it into a mixer and pulse it. But I think getting your hands messy is sometimes the best thing about baking, and also I think you get the best effects from it. So move it around, try and make sure that you're getting all the flour covered in a bit of the flour, so that we have those breadcrumbs. We don't want any big clumps, and we don't want sort of any dry bits of flour. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move that grease around. So like I said, pastry is a really, really simple thing to make. Doesn't take too much effort, doesn't take too much ingredients, but we can use it for lots of things, and we can add it to lots of things so that we can make lots of different things as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm pretty much there. So you see I'm sort of moving it around with my fingers. That movement, keep going on, you can see now that I'm getting to the point where I've pretty much got breadcrumbs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the camera and just show you so you can see the kind of consistency it should look like, if we can get it. There we go, perfect. So it looks very much like breadcrumbs. So that's what we're doing. So once we've got that, what we're then going to do is we're going to add some water to it, and then we're going to mix it around with a knife, which I need to get out of the drawer. And again, the reason we use a knife for this is because we don't want it sort of sticking. We're not mixing it, as it were. We're combining it, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. So we're just going to put some, this is cold water, by the way. So So just a couple of cold water first of all. Now again, it's up to you to sort of, I would always suggest in a recipe doing it bit by bit. You don't want to do too much in one go because you can't take things out of a recipe. We can have more in if we think we need more, but you can't obviously take it out. So once you've put some water in, what we're looking for is the ability to form a dough. So we want it to be able to sort of stick all together. So we don't want to put loads of water in, we still want it a bit crumbly because we want that crumbly texture. That is the thing about short pastry, that's what we're calling it, short crust pastry, is it's got that crumbliness to it. We're looking for the ability to have that crumbliness. So this is my dough now, this is my pastry. So there we go, we've made pastry, it's as simple as that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to look at creating different recipes using this pastry. So we don't want to make it an excess, so I haven't given you loads to make. But hopefully with this we can make some different recipes, going from quite easy to a bit more difficult. So what we need to do now is we need to get some more ingredients, and I think we'll go with the most simplest one first of all. We'll go with a cheese straw. So these are things that I make a lot of at Christmas. So I love a cheese straw at Christmas. They're really simple, anyone can make them, and they're really, really tasty. And it looks quite complex. Like when you present it to people, they're quite impressed that you've made it, but like I say, it's really, really simple. So what I'm doing is just, I had a few sort of crumbs at the bottom of that bowl, so I'm just getting those together. Now what we need to do actually before we make anything with our pastry is, the short crust pastry works best when it is cold. So the next thing you need to do is just put some wrap around this, like cling film, and put it in your fridge for around 10 or 15 minutes. And that is how it's going to work best. So what we need to do now is just have a little pause, go away, put it in the fridge for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then you can come back and watch the rest of the video. Okay, so my pastry's been chilling in the fridge for around 15 minutes now, so it's nice and cold, and now we are going to make some cheese straws with it. So we've got some flour that I've just put down on the side, and what I now need for this piece of ingredients is some cheese, and we are going, and then there's some optional things actually. We've got a little bit of milk that we will need, everyone will need that. And then we've got some options as well. We've got some paprika, and then we've got some salt. So this is salt that we can grind up. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my pastry, and I've put a little bit of flour down because what I'm going to do is just flatten it down, and then I've got some grated cheese. I'm going to put that in the middle of the flattened down pastry and just do a bit of kneading. So kneading, remember, is pushing it with the palm of your hand away from you and then folding it over the top. So what we're trying to do is mix in the cheese to the pastry. Now this will depend, how much cheese you want, depends on how cheesy really you want it to be. I like mine quite cheesy, so I put a lot of cheese in, so it gets filled up with cheese. But what I am going to do is I'm going to keep a bit of cheese, doesn't need to be loads, but I'm going to keep a bit of cheese for a bit later on. So once we have all of that cheese mixed in, I'll come again and show you in a minute what it looks like. Once we've got all that cheese mixed in, we're just going to roll it out. So we're just going to roll it into a flat bit. So I'll show you what it looks like now. So there we go. So it doesn't look much different, it's just got lots of cheese in it. So I'm going to take my rolling pin and just roll it out. So I suppose we want it to about the depth of like a £1 coin, about that, in how deep it needs to be. But again, it's up to you. Now I'm only going to make a couple of these because I've split my pastry, the original pastry, into different parts. But you can obviously use the amount of pastry we made originally and use it all for your cheese straws. So you'll probably end up with more cheese straws than you see me end up with. Okay, so I've rolled it out, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it into strips because we're making cheese straws. And then I'm going to put it onto a baking sheet. So I've got a baking sheet, I've got some baking parchment on it that I use. So we're going to cut just using a knife. It doesn't need to be a particularly sharp knife, just a normal knife. And the first thing we're going to do is neaten it up. So I want the edges to be quite neat. So I'm just going to take off the bits that aren't quite so neat. So we've got some straight edges. Again, we don't need to be overly precious or perfect with this. We are just making it so it looks a bit neater and tidy. Don't get rid of the extra bits though that you've cut off, because we can make some more out of those in a second. So we just squidge those up and put them to one side. Okay, so once we've done that, we're just going to cut what we've got left there into strips. And again, I'll just roll them off. So this is the kind of thing, that's all we need. And then we just put them onto our baking tray, onto that. So At this point, if you haven't already done so, make sure that your oven's on. So we're looking at around 200 degrees Celsius. So I think that's just over gas mark 5 or 6, around there. And just let it heat up as well. So while you're doing this, you could have done this at the beginning of either making your pastry or your cheese straws. So we're just going to cut those. So we've got quite a few cheese straws now. And then the next thing we're going to do, we want them to look really nice and brown. So we want to brown them off. Now on their own, if we cooked them just like they are, you would have some sort of maybe brown bits because the cheese inside it would sort of bubble up and go brown, but we want them a bit browner than that. So you've got two choices here. It depends what you've got in your cupboard and what you've got available. You could put on some milk on the top, which is what I'm going to do, or you could put on some egg. Just get an egg, put it into a cup, and then just beat it in a cup, and then just put that on top. That goes really nicely brown, but milk does just about the same job. So it just makes it so that pastry on top goes really nice and brown and just makes it look a bit more appealing. Okay, so I've got my cheese straws. They are completely different in length because these are meant to look rustic. You want them to look homemade. We're not perfect when we're home making something. And I've got a bit of the pastry left over. I'm just going to make a little dot. So we don't put anything to waste. It doesn't matter what shape they are. Okay, so like I said, we're going to put some milk on top. So I've got my special brush here, but again, a paintbrush would do, or if you've got nice clean hands, if you've washed your hands beforehand, you can just use a finger and just wipe some milk over the top. So like I say, we just put a little bit of milk on. We don't want to be having too much, it's just a little bit brushed over the top. And like I say, the reason for this is mostly to make it so that they look nice and brown. That's what we're looking for. Okay. And make sure you go over them. And then the next two ingredients are optional. This is if you think you might like it, it just adds a little bit to the flavour. So we've got two options here. We can either go with a bit of pepper. So if you've got a bit of pepper can, you can just put that on the top. Or another nice alternative to add to it is a bit of paprika. So if you like it just with that sort of smoky taste, you can put that on top as well. So I've done a couple of mine with pepper, a couple with the paprika. And do you remember we left some cheese at the side? Now what I like to do as well is just add a little bit of cheese onto the top of that as well. And again, it just adds really nicely to that cheesiness. Again, I'm not being too precious with this. I'm not worrying about if a couple of bits go on top or to the side. Again, it's meant to look a bit rusticy. You don't need to be too perfect. We just want a little bit of extra cheesiness on top. And then they are now ready to go into the oven. So again, I will just bring them over to show you what mine look like. And they are going to go into the oven. There's mine. Oh, you can see the milk going down there. They are going to go into the oven for around 15 to 20 minutes. I would just suggest you keep an eye on them. Maybe check them after 15 minutes. And all we're looking for is they're going to rise a little bit, but not very much at all. And all that cheese is going to melt and they're going to go a bit bubbly. The nice thing about these is I've made them with short crust pastry. You can make them with puff pastry as well, and then they puff up really big. But if you haven't got that, that's fine. So they're going to go in for 20 minutes, and then we're going to come back and see what they look like. And that is a really simple recipe with the short crust pastry, and that is cheese straws, and that's really easy. So we're going to have a go at making something with the rest of the pastry as well in a minute, and we're going to have a go at some very classic Christmassy mince pie. Okay, so the cheese straws have been in for about 20 minutes or so, maybe about 15-20 minutes. So we're going to get them out and see what they look like. Again, don't be very careful at this section. It's going to be very hot, so it might be that you need to get someone to help you take them out of the oven, or make sure you've got some oven gloves that you're going to pick them up with. So we're looking for them to be nicely golden brown on top, and hopefully smell lovely. So let's have a look. So they have come out perfectly. So I'll just bring them to the camera so we can see. So we've got some nice golden brown bits on them. And then all the cheese is melted. Now what you'll see is you can see they've all just sort of stuck together a bit. That's fine. When they're cool, now I'm lucky because I've been doing this a long time. I've got something called asbestos fingers, but they're very, very hot. Don't touch them. So you can leave them on this tray to cool. And then once they're cooled down, you just break off those extra cheese bits and you'll just get left with the cheese straws, or you might get the extra bits on like that and leave them like that, very rustic. So apart from that, they're completely done. So they will be lovely just to eat as they are, or you could dip them in something. You could dip them in a salsa or something like that, and they're completely done. So well done, that's our first activity of baking with short crust pastry, and hopefully we'll have a look now at how to make some mince pies as well. And don't forget, if you've made cheese straws, to upload your images. Try and get yourself in the image so we know who's made them, and hopefully that's another thing that you can add to your cooking skills. Well done, good luck. So it's very important to have our baking and getting our baking right, but what's just as important is this part, is making sure you are washing and cleaning up after yourself. So now is the time to go make sure that you have cleaned up after yourself, you've washed everything really thoroughly, and make sure that we're making sure the kitchen is nice and clean, because we don't want to make a big mess for someone else to clean up. So once again, hopefully you've enjoyed baking with us today, and watch out for next week when we'll be doing a bit more baking of something completely different. Thank you very much.